So, if you're here, thank you again for joining us on episode 2 of Pipeline Things. I think you will find this episode is equally as good as the first one. We wrap up with the bulk of our conversation on Chris Hoidal's discussion at IDT EXPO, where we spend a significant amount of time talking about opportunistic digs, the application of ECA, and what does it mean to parrot the code. In addition to that, if you've never heard the phrase, throw the baby out with the bathwater, we spend a little bit of time there too. So we definitely hope that you will follow this episode all the way through the end. And again, thank you. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review, and we thank you for your time.
Especially on our intro music. We'd love to get your feedback.
Yes, and don't throw the baby out with bathwater. Hello, welcome to the second episode of Pipeline Things. I am your host, Rhett Dotson, otherwise known as Thing 20, and I'm here with my co-host. I say co-host, that does not mean he is lesser in prominence or any other degree. He's just my compadre in crime here. Thing 21, otherwise known as Christopher De Leon. We are super happy to be here as we are on this learning journey of a podcast. I have to tell you guys, it took us like 6 takes just to figure out how to intro this podcast today. So hopefully, if you made it through episode 1, you are still here, God willing, and you've invited your family and friends, and we're going to impress them today too for episode number 2. So let's catch everybody back up on this podcast, Pipeline Things. We're going to be talking about all things pipeline related. Our intent is to make it useful for you, for your family, your friends. If you're a pipeliner, chances are you're probably like both of us, which means your family doesn't know what you do. Your spouses might not know what you do. Your parents, you probably haven't even told them you're in the pipeline industry yet because they're not even aware there are pipelines out there. So let's pick it up. Christopher, last week, tell us a little bit, what did we talk about? Because this was a 2-part episode, so I got to see if the audience knows. But before then, we'll see if you know. What did we talk about last time?
Yep. So inaugural episode was on IDT EXPO. IDT is an acronym. We're in pipelines. We love acronyms. It stands for Innovation, Design, and Technology. And in that, for each of those, we have a featured speaker who talks about either innovation, design, or technology. And to wrap all that up, we had Mr. Chris Hoidal with PHMSA, who is retiring this year. And so wish you, again, farewell. And thanks for all your service. He summarized what we will call the Big Six as it relates to RIN 1 or Part 1 of the new gas rule. And so we covered the first 3 topics. Now we're going to cover the following 3 topics in today's episode.
Absolutely. So just recapping those first 3, right? Because I don't want to take the audience down an entire journey. As I mentioned before, we could probably do an episode, not a show, because I learned today that a show is what we do here, and an episode is an individual topic. We're going to do an episode on each one of those 6. We hit them real closely, or real quickly as we went through that. So the first one was MAOP reconfirmation applicability. There's a lot going on there around whether or not your pipeline was grandfathered. Very interesting, but also I'm going to say it's fairly limited, I'm going to say, in its scope. It either is going to hit you or not hit you as a pipeline operator.
Well, I think one thing you want to look out for is it's the batch 2 of the FAQs are due to come out. And this topic may be one of the reasons why they haven't been published yet. So there's a lot of conversation going on about MAOP reconfirmation applicability. So definitely look for FAQ 65 when batch 2 comes out.
Thank you. Really good point there. And then the second one was non-TVC hydro test. We just covered the fact that I think people understand that in a very limited scope. But Chris broadened it, that they're going to take more than just simply something as if the only thing you're missing is a signature on something or a lack of time duration. It wasn't totally 8 hours, it was 6.5. PHMSA up here is willing to take some of that.
Maybe not so much on time, but definitely as it relates to some of the details of the documentation, they're definitely encouraging you to reach out to them and have a discussion about what you have and the impact of not considering what records you do have TVC. So definitely open towards collaborating and having a discussion. So definitely encourage us to do that.
Absolutely. And that brings us to our third one, which is actually where we left off, our first cliffhanger episode ever, which was opportunistic dig definition. And it seems so simple.
Yeah, and procedures.
Opportunistic. If I have an opportunity,
take
I
it.
dig.
You verify material properties. So basically,
you had an opportunity to win in fantasy football, and you did not.
Derrick Henry. He might be back, but he wasn't back in time to make the playoff bracket.
I just have to let all you guys, I'm sure we have other fantasy football fans out there. Chris did not make the playoffs for the first time ever. I, however, though, I'm still in the playoff trend, so I'm good. If you have recommendations that you would make for me carrying into the playoffs, I will gladly take them. So, back to opportunistic.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what's so tough about this opportunistic question, Chris?
Yeah, so it's not tough, right? It's more about expectation, right? So what PHMSA is looking for is for you to define what is constituted as an opportunistic dig. And the intent is basically if you have an opportunity because you've excavated or exposed the line for you to go on ahead and try to achieve some material properties verification. And a big part of that, though, is also having the procedures for what that means and what you're going to do. And don't forget about OQ tasks as it associates to working on in-service pipe.
So wait.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity, you have to take it.
It depends what your procedure says.
No, I mean, the ditch is open.
Yeah.
You got to get it.
Yeah. What if
is that the definition that PHMSA is going for here?
I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I think they want to ensure that you're being prudent about taking advantage of those opportunities, and they really want you to take it from a programmatic approach versus a series of discrete actions. I think they would encourage that. Not necessarily that speaking for them, but I think so far what we've seen and heard is more about having a program in place versus maybe managing things as one-offs.
So let me ask the question another way.
Yeah.
I opened the ditch.
Yeah.
Is it okay that I did not necessarily take that opportunity to get it?
I think there's a lot of things to consider there, right? We always got to think about safety. There's only finite resources in the market. So what if you wanted to go and use one of these non-destructive pipe grade determining technologies for yield strength and UTS, and there's no techs available, or the equipment isn't available when you had to go do an immediate dig, right? If you've got an immediate dig that's 5 days, you might not be able to get a vendor lined up to do material properties verification. And so what are you going to do? You're going to leave the bell hole open until someone's available? What if that's 60 days? Right, there could be some risks there, some safety issues. So it's not as easy as it sounds, and that's why again they want us to think not so much in discrete scenarios, but rather what program are you putting in place, what are your definitions, and what do your procedures say?
Really, tell me what you're going to do, when you're going to do it, and when you're not going to do it.
Basically,
I mean, really, that's it.
Yeah.
So I like that summed it up. But
and they want it written.
And they want it written. Yeah, absolutely. So that brings us to the next one. And this one even confused me. I had to ask you about it for the show notes. Proper application of ECA.
Yep, so ECA is very specific to one of the 6 methods to reconfirm your MAOP, it being option 3, which is engineering critical assessment, defined in 192.632. So that's where they define the requirements for an ECA. And I think the big point there is, one, you need to have your procedures written, what it is you're going to do in an ECA. And to sum it up, basically, their intent that they try to recommunicate, which you were highlighted at one of the more recent AGA conferences with the definition of the intent, is to conservatively mirror a hydro test or a pressure test 1.25 times MAOP, but not unrealistically. And by unrealistically, what we mean is you want to make sure you have the right data and assumptions that don't make you go beyond what would practically be assessed through a hydro test, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's a big part. And so part of that, then you need to identify what threats you're assessing. Then you need to go and assess for those threats and identify those features that are in the line and how they're described, assess them for hydro test equivalency, and then make sure you document all that, right? They want all of this stuff documented.
Just for the audience, just so that they're aware, you mentioned AGA and you mentioned me getting called out. And I always like the opportunity to highlight.
I would say it's referenced. I don't know if it's called out. Yeah, it's more of a reference.
I was featured.
So you can kind of like asterisk on your procedure and say per Rhett Dotson at AGA 2021.
But I tell you what, it doesn't matter, whatever you want to call it. Showcased, referenced, highlighted, called out. There's nothing like having a PHMSA regulator up there going through the process in front of a full room of directors and managers, and then they call out your name.
Yeah.
And reference, because you, God help us, you don't know what's about to come out. You don't know if your career is over after he announces that, or if you're about to get a plug. Fortunately, I think my name was not used in vain. I thought it was in a positive light.
Yeah.
But,
so did he say Rhett or Rex? Like Rex or like Rhett?
He didn't call him, not like the T-Rex, the little stuffy armed animal. Okay. No, it was Rhett. He got my name right.
Just curious. All right.
You know, that's a sore point with me. I don't even give out my real name at restaurants. Why are you bringing that stuff up? Because I never get Rhett, Rex, Brett, everything else under the sun.
Yeah.
In fact, I got to check with the producer and make sure that my name is spelled right. If they give credits on the end, Rex Dodson's probably going to... Don't you dare put her up to that. Oh my gosh. Back on topic. More importantly, help me out. So, I mean, we said proper application of ECA. I mean, what the heck's an improper application of the ECA?
Yeah, well, a couple of things would be, let's say you deploy an inline inspection system for a specific threat, let's call it cracking or a seam issue that you may have, and you decide to use a fracture mechanics model that doesn't necessarily deem applicable. We deem it applicable based on either the material properties that you have or the assumptions that you're making. And so it's definitely understanding the different steps within your ECA process that you're doing, and that those all have a sound engineering background. So definitely encouraging the concept of SME to engage in these ECAs. And so as it means the appropriate application of it's just all those details within establishing failure pressures, response criteria, and all of the activities associated with the ECA.
Cool. So you mentioned SME. I mean, asking for a friend.
Yeah.
If you're referenced by the PHMSA guy in the presentation, do you classify as an SME?
Yeah. You know, I once heard that pride is sticky. Like once you get it, it's just kind of like all over you. I feel like we need to like rub you down with an egg or something to get it off of you.
We'll move on past.
Some of you will understand that reference.
Oh, goodness gracious. The audience is confused right now. We'll look at it. The number of clicks just went down. All right. So let's move on. So that was number 4, which was proper application of ECA. I do think there was one point, actually, before we move on there.
Yeah.
He mentioned a flow chart, actually. So PHMSA has some, I'm going to say, ancillary or supporting documentation that they're directing people to. So it's not a matter of just going, for instance, to 192 and looking at the section that you want there. They've got a bunch of supporting information on the website.
They do.
And so can you give us an example of that?
Sure. So one, definitely go to the GPAC meeting notes. Those are all published and transcribed as the meetings happen. And there's also preamble for each of these new codes. Those are very useful. Then there's FAQs, frequently asked questions, and PHMSA's response to them. So all of this is available on the PHMSA website or the DOT website. And also as part of that, one of the things that Mr. Hoidal pointed us to is there are some pipeline compliance forms and references that you can find. We'll make sure that we include that and make that available as part of this episode. But you can go to it, and he did reference a very specific flow chart about the first part, which is MAOP reconfirmation applicability, to where it speaks to their interpretation of when you have to reconfirm an MAOP or not. And that is a workflow, it's a reference and not necessarily an interpretation. So just always keep that stuff in mind and leverage your direct engagement with your regulator.
You know, and this is one of the things that strikes me, right? So when you look at the updated gas rule, and I know we're going to have multiple episodes on this later on because we'll be breaking it down by parts, but when you look at the updated gas rule, it's so big in scope and complexity that you've got FAQs now, batch 1, batch 2 that's supplementing it. You've got these other things that are appearing on the website to supplement it. Yeah. I didn't operate quite as much in IMP01 or the first revision of CFR. I mean, but you did, obviously, in your time as a gas operator. Was there as much supporting information around, let's call it the original genesis as you see in this one, or do you feel like that's kind of a new thing?
I feel like, and I say feel because I wasn't there at its inception, kind of on the early stages of it, that I think maybe the chemistry or the engagement between operators and regulators is a little bit more dynamic now. Whereas towards the latter parts of the 2000s, FAQs were available and they were referenced. Inspection protocols were used. I think that was very discrete and it was very binary, black and white. Whereas I think now with written 1 of the new gas rule, I feel like it's modeled through 192.18. Where you can submit an alternate process where PHMSA is seeking engagement from operators to approach them and say, hey, here's what we're doing, and then PHMSA will do a no objection, right? PHMSA is being really proactive about putting out different batches of FAQs and getting comments on them,
Absolutely.
which is really neat. So the opportunity to comment is there, and I think that's really positive, right? It allows a lot of communication.
I do agree. I think PHMSA is working very hard to make sure that the rule is properly understood and applied by operators.
Yeah.
So it brings us again. We've now moved through 4 onto the 5th one.
Yeah.
Interesting one, because this one says a procedure just parroting the code.
Yeah. So we'll speak to that. That's pretty easy. You know, we've had an opportunity to look at a couple of procedures that were provided to us for review, for them to be augmented a bit with some more of the technical specifications. And basically what PHMSA is saying, whether it have been through some of their mock audits or some of the inspections they're actively going through, or feedback that they received, is they don't just want to see where you're copying and pasting parts of code into your procedures that say we will do this, right? What they're really looking for is for you to have a procedure on how you're going to achieve the intent of it. And so they just want to be real clear about that, right? So whether that be how you're dealing with MCAs or how you're performing material properties verification, back to the opportunistic digs, you know, what does that look like? You know, and put those specifics and details and requirements in there. And again, just I want to encourage, you know, one, if you guys aren't sure what that looks like, you know, ask for help. Whether it be us here at ADV and our called out SME, or whoever.
I think that's self-identified. I think we get real close to self-identified SME there in that last week. I've got to be careful in that.
Or whoever you're used to working with. I think the idea is it's ask for help, right? And I would definitely encourage this concept of fail fast. Right, so put something on paper, reach out to someone you have confidence with, some trust in, ask them for their input, put some more information, some details in it, and then as you're comfortable, you know, either approach PHMSA for a no objection or give someone a call, and definitely feel free to make it a little bit of an iterative process, I guess, if that makes sense.
See, all of that to say, you can't copy and paste the code into your IMP plan. You can't. It won't fly.
You know, I think that's
unless
also
you've got a different definition of parroting.
Yeah,
you can't copy and paste the code.
You know, I think it will also depend on applicability, right? You know, so if you don't have any MCAs on your line, you know, you could see where you only have finite resources any given day. You know, you put something there that has a call to action, but maybe doesn't have all the details because you don't have MCAs on your line, as an example, right? So don't necessarily want to say.
Don't copy and paste the code. I'll say it. Chris won't. He's going to be the good cop. I'll be the backup. Don't copy and paste the code. Right.
Hi, my name is Chris Alexander, and I'm president and founder of ADV Integrity, and we are the proud sponsors of the Pipeline Things podcast led by Rhett Dotson and Christopher DeLeon. In that podcast, they're going to be talking about things like integrity management, pretty much anything related to pipelines, including regulations, technology, and anything that you would need to know. They're also going to be talking about current events. For those of you that don't know anything about ADV Integrity, we're a consulting company. We do full-scale testing. I'm actually here in the lab, and really high-end engineering to serve the pipeline industry. And we would love to hear from you, and really excited about being sponsors of the Pipeline Things podcast.
So let's get into the 6th one then, right? And because again, this is one that I think was strange to me. Specifically, he said, you know, not adding OQ covered task for material verification work, and that was really specific.
Yeah.
So break it down for me, Chris.
I will. I think the idea there was it's these big 6. Again, I want to set the backdrop for it. I mean, these are results of the 6 mock audits, right? So again, kudos to those 6 operators that raised their hand when the GRIT team, the gas regulatory implementation team from PHMSA, went out and said, hey, we want to do some mock audits, you know, let's learn. So from those 6, these are some of the big 6 takeaways that they have. And part of that was they may have procedures that were written, whether they were copy and pasted from code or not, but they felt that there was a consistent trend of identifying if that specific task within a procedure required operator qualification or not, right? So whether that be related to the launchers and the receivers or activities you're doing in the ditch on in-service live pipe through an opportunistic dig, whether you're working on the surface of the pipe to do some kind of measurement, whatever it may be, they just want that conscious effort of you thinking about what's an OQ task and what's not and making sure that's in your procedures.
So help me understand why call out material verification specifically in that, right? Like I think broadly I get OQ task as a whole, but it's specifically directed at material verification. Any thoughts there?
So when we think of material properties verification, a couple of things come to mind, right? So number one is it's not just pipe, right? So keep that in mind when you're thinking about your OQ tasks. The other part of it is whatever non-destructive test you're doing in situ on in-service pipe, or if you're trying to take a coupon out, through some kind of hot tapping, the thing you want to think in mind is if it's in service and you're acting on the facility, then it's an OQ task, right? So let's say for whatever reason that in this circumstance your pipeline needs to be buffed or polished, maybe a little grinding. That would be a good example of, in that procedure for material properties verification, if you had an activity of buffing, polishing, or grinding, you're acting on an in-service facility, that's an OQ task.
Wow. All right, so again, I think the major takeaway from all of this, right, is that PHMSA is out there. I think we're kind of on the cusp of the first round of operators that have volunteered, subjected themselves to the auditing process.
Volunteered. Thank you.
Volunteered.
Thank
subjected
you.
themselves. Yes, we appreciate your sacrifice. So, and after they've gone through this, PHMSA is identifying these 6 things and kind of bringing them to our attention. So again, just want to hit them all 6 real quickly, right? Which is MAOP reconfirmation applicability. Understand when and where you need to reconfirm MAOP, with particular emphasis on grandfathered pipe. There are still some things going on there, and really need to pay attention to the updated batch of FAQs coming out.
I mean, again, a big example there is if under grandfather you were operating above 72% SMICE, you may want to take a look at what records you have, TVC records for pressure testing, and what that means for operating at above 72% SMICE or bringing that to 72% SMICE.
Second one was the non-TVC hydro test. Just because it doesn't dot every I and cross every T of a subpart J hydro test, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. That was the take there, right? So working in some really good
this. This
quotes.
is good.
This is good?
This is good.
You've heard that before, right? Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if that was just a Southern Louisiana thing, but I don't think it was. I think they throw babies out with bathwater everywhere. It's universal. I don't think it just happens in Southern Louisiana. So, third one was opportunistic dig definition, right? Really around making sure that you have the procedures there. Fourth one, proper application of ECA. And, the thing there to take away was that with this rule, we're seeing a lot of other stuff come out, right? These flow charts that you mentioned, and again, we'll have those links in the show notes, as well as other supplementary information that's coming out in the existing FAQ and the upcoming FAQ as well. Don't copy and paste CFR 192 and supplement it as your IMP. Apparently PHMSA is frowning upon that now, so don't do that. And then 6 was about adding OQ covered tasks for material verification work. That really kind of summed up Chris Hoidal's talk, at least as it pertained to RIM 1.
Yeah, and a good example of that would be the highlighting of definitions, right? Definitions are really important, right? So in this case, we did not define what baby means. Right, so I just wanted to put it out there, right? So if you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, that's the importance of a definition, right? So
it means the good stuff in the bath. Don't throw the dishes out. You know what? You're probably right. Today, don't throw the dishes out with the dishwater. That's what we will revise this to. This is so much more. Yes, right now. Okay. All right. So on that note, that kind of sums it up, right? So. Hopefully, again, you see kind of the flavor we're going for in this podcast. We hope you're going to join us up. We put together a host of really good topics that we're going to be talking about in the future. Just a few of them that come to mind you're going to be hearing from us. If you've ever wondered how and why we ended up where we're at with regards to the regulatory atmosphere, we're going to talk a little about some of the historical failures and the genesis of the original, what we call Integrity 1.0. SCC, I know, is another hot topic out there. I'm going to say ILI in general, both how and when you should run a tool, different types of tools that are out there, as well as Chris's favorite, API 1163, and how to validate technology. So we've got a lot of good topics on the horizon. Remember, this is a podcast not just for you as a pipeliner, but for hopefully everybody you know. So we appreciate, let's be broad here. You want to hit everybody.
Yeah.
Children, spouses, parents, cousins, everybody. Hopefully we'll get something from this.
He brings up a good point, right? So I'm gonna bring us back to something that may be a little bit more relevant, right? So we have increased regulation, which means there's more pressure, more requirements. There's only finite resources, and we need talent, right? YPP's done a great job of going to universities, and so is recruiting by some of our operators. Different organizations out there are trying to attract talent to the pipeline industry.
And that's what we're doing here.
So the goal is don't show them this podcast because they won't take us seriously, okay?
This is real world pipelines. This is what it's like. All right. Well, this is fabulous. Love it. Hopefully you guys are having fun with us. If you are, please subscribe and give us a review. Chris likes to say smash
the subscribe button. My 8-year-old daughter has a little YouTube channel. She says, smash the subscribe button.
You know what's scary is if your 8-year-old daughter has more subscribers than we do. So, please, on that note, family, friends, mom, dad, spouses, significant others, co-workers, anybody that might be interested in this, we would love your support and appreciate it. We will be putting out this podcast every other Wednesday, so you can look to see us bringing you some good information about pipelines. And that is going to conclude this episode of Pipeline Things. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. I am your host, Thing20, and my co-host, Thing21, signing off until next time.